guards did not touch him, which was somehow worse than if they had. They simply walked on either side, tall and silent, their elongated ears angled slightly backward, as if even acknowledging his presence would be an inconvenience. He tried not to stare, but it was difficult not to notice how everything about them seemed designed with intention. Precise movements, flawless armor, even the faint glow running along the seams of their suits like quiet veins of light. He, on the other hand, had dust on his sleeve and a small tear near his collar that he kept forgetting to fix. "Just so we're clear," he muttered as they passed through another impossibly tall doorway. "If this ends with me being vaporized, I'd like to formally complain in advance." Neither guard responded. He sighed. Tough crowd. The corridor opened into something that made him stop mid-step. The space was enormous, stretching upward into a ceiling that seemed less like architecture and more like a controlled sky. Structures curved and spiraled with elegant geometry, forming a throne chamber that felt alive in a way he couldn't quite explain. At the far end, elevated on a platform that demanded attention without asking for it, sat the queen. He had expected something alien in the way humans usually meant it, something distant, unrelatable. Instead, she looked almost human, and that somehow made it more unsettling. Her face was composed, her features refined with a precision that bordered on perfection, and from either side of her head extended long, graceful ears that marked her as unmistakably other. Her gaze found him immediately, not curious, not hostile, just dismissive. He suddenly became very aware of the dust on his sleeve again. One of the guards stepped forward and spoke in a language he didn't understand, a sequence of tones that sounded too structured to be casual. A device embedded in the floor pulsed softly, and a moment later the words reached him in his own language, smooth and slightly too perfect. "Human, state your function." He blinked. "Function?" He scratched the back of his neck. "That's a strong word. I mean, I wake up, I try not to break anything important, and occasionally I succeed." There was a pause. Somewhere in the chamber, a few figures shifted, their attention sharpening. The queen's expression did not change. "Your purpose," she clarified, her voice calm and controlled, carrying effortlessly across the vast space. "Ah, right." He glanced around as if hoping someone else might answer for him. No one did. "I fix things," he said finally. "Mostly." That did it. A faint ripple moved through the chamber. Not quite laughter, but close enough to feel like it. He heard a low murmur, a subtle shift in posture from the figures lining the sides. Their reactions restrained, but unmistakable. He raised a hand slightly. "In my defense, I fix them very well." The queen leaned back just enough to signal disinterest. "We have no shortage of engineers." "Yeah," he said, nodding as if he agreed completely. "I've met engineers, lovely people, terrible at admitting when something's broken." Another murmur, sharper this time. The queen's eyes narrowed just a fraction, not in anger, but in calculation. "You stand before a court that governs systems beyond your comprehension." "Probably," he said, "but broken is broken. Doesn't matter how fancy it looks while it's doing it." For a moment, the chamber held its breath. He could feel it, not tension exactly, but a kind of suspended judgment. The queen studied him, her gaze lingering just long enough to make him wonder if he had crossed some invisible line. Then, without warning, the floor beneath the chamber flickered. It was subtle at first, a brief distortion in the ambient light, a barely noticeable tremor that rippled through the structure like a suppressed heartbeat. The figures along the walls stiffened. The guards near him shifted their stance, their composure cracking just enough to reveal something underneath. The queen did not move, but her eyes flicked upward for a fraction of a second. "What was that?" he asked, already looking around. No one answered him. Instead, a series of symbols erupted into the air above the chamber, forming a complex lattice of data that rotated and reconfigured at a speed that made his eyes hurt. Voices rose, not panicked, but urgent. Controlled urgency, the kind that tried very hard not to admit it was panic. He tilted his head. "Okay, I don't want to alarm anyone," he said, "but that definitely looked like something that shouldn't be happening." One of the figures snapped something in their language, sharp and precise. The data shifted again, the lattice tightening, then fracturing into smaller, unstable patterns. He took a step forward before anyone could stop him. That's an energy distribution loop, he said, squinting slightly. Or, it was. Now it's kind of having an identity crisis. Several heads turned toward him, their attention no longer dismissive. The Queen's gaze returned to him, sharper now. Explain. He gestured vaguely toward the floating structure. You've got feedback building up in the system. It's trying to correct itself, but the correction is feeding the problem. Classic over-engineering. Happens all the time. That system has functioned without failure for centuries, one of the advisors said, their tone tight. Yeah, he replied, and now it's not. Another flicker ran through the chamber, stronger this time. The light dimmed for a fraction of a second, then snapped back into place. He winced. Okay, that's new. I'm upgrading my concern level from mildly worried to we should probably do something. The Queen stood. The movement was small, but it shifted the entire atmosphere of the room. Silence followed instantly, the kind that demanded obedience. Her eyes remained on him. You claim to understand this failure. I claim it's breaking, he said. Understanding it is optional if you just want it to stop. A pause, then, after a moment that stretched just long enough to matter, she spoke again. Proceed. He blinked. That's it. No trial, no dramatic speech. No, proceed, she repeated, her voice leaving no space for negotiation. He let out a breath, glancing once more at the unstable lattice above them. All right, he said, rolling his shoulders slightly. Let's see how badly this thing wants to explode. He stared at the floating lattice for a few seconds longer than anyone in the room found comfortable. Not because he was intimidated, but because he was trying to ignore the fact that hundreds of very important alien eyes were now locked onto him, silently expecting competence. Right, he muttered, rubbing his hands together. No pressure. The structure above pulsed again, sharper this time, like a system growing impatient with its own instability. Symbols rearranged themselves into patterns that almost made sense, then immediately contradicted that sense. He pointed at it. That part right there? That's your problem. One of the advisors stepped forward, clearly offended. That is not a part. That is a multi-layered quantum synchronization array designed by... Yeah, he waved a hand. Very impressive. I'm sure it has a long name and a ceremony attached to it. Still breaking. A few of the guards shifted, and he could swear one of them almost smiled before catching themselves. He walked closer, ignoring the subtle tension that followed his movement. The air near the structure felt different, charged, like standing too close to a storm that hadn't decided whether to strike yet. Do I get tools? He asked casually. Or is this one of those fix it with your thoughts situations? No one answered. He looked back at them. Tools would be great. I left my cosmic repair kit in my other pants. A brief pause, then, with a soft mechanical sound, a panel opened near the edge of the chamber. From it extended a set of instruments, sleek, glowing, and completely unfamiliar. He stared at them. Oh, good, he said dryly. Alien tools, because regular confusion wasn't enough. He picked one up, turning it over in his hand. It shifted shape slightly, adapting to his grip. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. Above him, the lattice fractured again, a sharp crack of light running through it. The room dimmed for a fraction of a second. Yep, he said quickly. Cool tools later, not exploding now? He stepped directly beneath the structure. Several voices immediately rose in protest. You cannot stand there. That position is unstable. There is a high probability of... Relax, he said, glancing up. If it explodes, I'll let you know. That is not reassuring. It's honest. He crouched slightly, examining the patterns more closely. His eyes tracked the flow, not the symbols themselves, but the way they moved, the rhythm beneath the complexity. There you are, he murmured. The Queen watched him without interruption. Her posture remained composed, but her focus had sharpened into something far more attentive than before. What do you see? She asked. He didn't look at her. A system trying way too hard to be perfect. He reached out with the tool, hesitating just a second. You built this to correct every possible error, right? No tolerance for imperfection? That is correct, one of the advisors replied. Yeah, he said. That's the problem. Before anyone could stop him, he tapped the lattice. The reaction was immediate. The entire structure flared, light surging outward in a sharp pulse. The chamber dimmed again, longer this time, and a low hum filled the air like something waking up in a bad mood. Several guards stepped forward instantly. The advisors began speaking over each other. System destabilization increasing. You have worsened the condition. He has no understanding of... Hey, he snapped, still focused upward. If you all want to panic, do it quietly. That surprisingly worked. The noise dropped just enough for him to think. He adjusted the tool, twisting it slightly. It responded by reshaping again, emitting a faint tone. Okay, you don't need to fix everything, he muttered, half to himself, half to the system. You just need to stop trying to fix everything at once. He made another quick adjustment. This time, instead of flaring, the lattice stuttered. Not stable, not yet, but different. He grinned slightly. There it is. What did you do? The Queen asked. I made it worse, he said. Silence. Then he added, temporarily. Another flicker ran through the system, but it didn't spike as violently this time. The patterns slowed, their frantic corrections easing into something more controlled. You built a loop that reacts to itself too fast, he explained. It's like trying to apologize before you've even finished making the mistake. You just end up apologizing forever. No one spoke. He glanced back briefly. You've never done that? The room remained completely still. Right. Just me then. He turned back, making one final adjustment. The tool pulsed softly, then went quiet. The lattice above him hesitated. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the patterns began to stabilize. The sharp edges softened. The erratic shifts smoothed into a steady, controlled flow. The hum in the air faded, replaced by a quiet, balanced resonance. The chamber lights returned to full strength. Silence followed. Not the tense silence from before, a different kind. He straightened, exhaling slowly. Okay, he said, brushing his hands together. That should hold. Probably. Probably, one of the advisors echoed, horrified. He shrugged. Look, if it breaks again, just don't fix it so aggressively. Let it breathe a little. That system does not breathe. Everything breathe, he said. You just don't always notice it. The Queen stepped down from her platform. The movement was deliberate, measured. The guards tensed but did not interfere. She approached him slowly, her gaze fixed on his face. Up close, she seemed even more precise. Every detail of her expression controlled. And yet, something in her eyes had shifted. Not dismissal, not quite respect either. Something in between. You altered a system that has remained unchanged for centuries, she said. Yeah, he replied. It was overdue. Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, he added, also, your interface is terrible. A faint ripple moved through the chamber again, but this time it wasn't quite as hostile. The Queen studied him for a long moment. You speak without caution, she said. I speak honestly, he answered. It saves time. Her gaze lingered just a second longer than necessary. Then she turned slightly, addressing the chamber without looking away from him. He will remain. The words landed heavily. Several advisors shifted immediately. Your Majesty, this decision... She raised a hand. Silence returned instantly. Her eyes finally moved away from him, but not with the same indifference as before. This human, she continued, is no longer to be dismissed. He tilted his head. That's the nicest, almost compliment I've gotten all week. No one laughed. He sighed. Still a tough crowd. They did not imprison him. That was the first strange decision. The second was giving him a room. Calling it a room felt inaccurate the moment he stepped inside. It was more like a contained section of a larger system, a space where walls curved instead of meeting, and surfaces adjusted their texture the moment he got too close. The lighting responded to him in subtle shifts, as if the room was trying to guess what he needed and getting it slightly wrong every time. Okay, he said, looking around. This is either hospitality or a very polite trap. The door sealed behind him without a sound. I'm leaning toward trap. He took a few steps forward, testing the floor. It held. Good start. At the center of the room floated a cluster of devices. Broken, inactive, or simply abandoned. He could tell immediately. The way the energy signatures flickered unevenly, the slight misalignment in their structure. It was the same quiet language of things that had stopped working properly. He smiled. "Oh, you poor things," he murmured, walking closer. "They gave up on you, didn't they?" One of the devices pulsed weakly, as if offended. Yeah, he said, crouching down. "I know that feeling." A panel opened along the wall, revealing a set of tools similar to the ones from the chamber. Sleek, adaptive, and still slightly too confident in themselves. He picked one up. "All right," he said, turning it in his hand. "Let's see what you do before I accidentally turn you into something illegal." The tool shifted, forming a thin arc of light at its edge. "That seems dangerous." He grinned anyway. Hours passed, though it was difficult to tell exactly how many. The room did not track time in any way he recognized. But the devices began to respond, one by one. A fractured energy core stabilized under his adjustments, its flickering glow smoothing into a steady pulse. A collapsed interface reassembled itself when he removed a single unnecessary feedback loop. A diagnostic sphere that had been silent for who knows how long suddenly emitted a soft tone, as if clearing its throat after years of disuse. "See?" he said, leaning back slightly. "You're not broken, just misunderstood." The sphere responded with another tone. Or maybe you're broken. Still working on that." Unbeknownst to him, the room was not as private as it seemed. Beyond the curved walls, behind layers of discrete observation systems, several figures watched. "He dismantles the structures without hesitation," one advisor said, their voice low. "No reverence, no procedural respect." "And yet he restores function," another replied. "That does not justify his methods." The Queen stood slightly apart from them, her gaze fixed on the projection in front of her. The human moved with a strange rhythm, unstructured, inefficient by every standard she had been taught, and yet effective. He paused mid-motion, staring at one of the devices. "Why would you design it like that?" he muttered. "It's like you wanted it to fail." He tapped the surface lightly, then frowned. "Wait, no. You expected something else to compensate for it." He straightened slightly, eyes narrowing. "Which means there's another system." He turned abruptly, scanning the room. "That isn't here." The advisors exchanged glances. "He should not be able to infer that," one said. The Queen did not respond. Back inside the room, he walked toward the far wall, where the surface appeared smooth and uninterrupted. "All right," he said, placing a hand against it. "You're hiding something." The wall did not react. He sighed. "Of course you are." He stepped back, looking around for a moment, then grabbed one of the tools. "Let's try this the subtle way," he said. He tapped the wall once. Nothing. He tapped it again, slightly harder. Still nothing. He looked at the tool. "You're supposed to impress me, you know." The tool pulsed faintly. "Great," he said. "No pressure." He adjusted it, then pressed it firmly against the surface. This time the wall responded. A thin line of light traced itself outward from the point of contact, spreading in a geometric pattern. The surface shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. "Ha," he said, grinning. "Found you." Inside was a compact system, damaged but not beyond repair. Its structure was more complex than anything else in the room, its energy signature faint but distinct. "Oh, you're important," he murmured. He reached in carefully, examining it. "Let me guess," he said. "They couldn't figure you out, so they just hid you." The system emitted a weak pulse. "Yeah," he nodded. "Happens to the best of us." He began working on it immediately, his movements slower this time, more deliberate. Outside, the advisors leaned forward slightly. "That device was isolated for a reason," one said. "It was deemed incompatible with the rest of the system." The Queen's gaze remained steady. "And yet it is part of it." Inside, the human paused, tilting his head. "Okay," he said softly. "You're not broken. You're just not meant to work the way they think you should." He adjusted the tool again, carefully rerouting a small portion of the energy flow. The system flickered. Once, twice, then suddenly it activated. Not violently, not dramatically, just correctly. The glow stabilized, its pattern aligning in a way that felt almost relieved. He let out a quiet breath. There you go. The other devices in the room responded almost immediately. Their signals shifted, synchronizing with the newly activated system. The entire space seemed to settle, like a puzzle finally recognizing its missing piece. He leaned back, looking around. Okay, that's actually very satisfying. A soft tone echoed through the room, then another. He blinked. Wait, are you all talking now? The tones overlapped slightly, forming a pattern. He listened for a moment, then chuckled. All right, I don't understand you yet, he said, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. The door behind him opened silently. He turned. The Queen stood there. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then he gestured vaguely at the room. So, he said, good news. Your broken stuff wasn't broken. Her eyes moved across the devices, taking in the synchronized patterns, the steady energy flow. You reactivated the isolated system, she said. Yeah, he replied. Turns out ignoring part of your own system isn't a great long-term strategy. A pause, then he added, also, I may have talked to it a little. She looked at him. You spoke to the device. I speak to everything, he said. It helps, sometimes. The faintest shift touched her expression. Not quite confusion, not quite amusement. You assume connection where there is none, she said. He shrugged. Or I notice it where others don't. Silence lingered for a moment. Then she stepped into the room, her gaze returning to him. You continue to produce results that contradict expectation, she said. Yeah, he nodded. I've been told that's a problem. Her eyes held his. For others, she said. He smiled slightly. Good. I'd hate to start fitting in. She did not leave immediately. That was new. He noticed it first, not because of what she did, but because of what she didn't do. She didn't issue a command, didn't summon guards, didn't turn away with that quiet finality he had come to expect. She simply remained there, standing among the softly humming systems he had just repaired, her long ears angled slightly as if listening to something deeper than sound. He glanced at her, then back at the devices. So, is this the part where I get promoted, demoted, or quietly erased from existence? Her gaze shifted to him. You speak often of your own termination. I like to stay prepared, he said. Low expectations. Makes everything else feel like a bonus. She stepped closer, her movement measured, the air around her carrying that same subtle gravity as the throne chamber. Explain what you did, she said. He scratched his chin lightly. That depends. Do you want the complicated explanation or the honest one? The accurate one. Ah, he nodded. That's usually somewhere in between. He gestured toward the reactivated system. You had a piece of your network that didn't behave the way you expected. Instead of adapting around it, you isolated it, which made everything else work harder to compensate. Over time, that built tension. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the device, then back to him. And your solution was to restore it. My solution was to stop pretending it didn't belong, he said. Systems don't like being incomplete. Neither do people. She studied him for a moment, longer than necessary. You draw parallels where none are required, she said. He shrugged. I draw them where they're useful. A faint tone echoed from one of the devices, almost like agreement. He pointed at it. See? Even it gets it. That is not agreement, she said. Sure, he replied. And I'm not talking to machines. You are talking to machines. Exactly. A brief silence followed, and for the first time it wasn't uncomfortable. She moved past him, closer to the central cluster. The light reflected subtly across her features, softening the sharp precision of her expression just enough to make something else visible underneath. Something less rigid. You altered the system without full knowledge of its design, she said. Yep. You introduced variables you could not predict. Also true. And yet it's stabilized. He smiled slightly. Sometimes you don't need to know everything. You just need to know what matters. She turned back to him. And what matters? He thought for a second. Where the pressure is coming from and where it has nowhere to go. Her gaze lingered again, and this time he noticed it more clearly. Not the authority behind it, but the curiosity. It made him slightly uncomfortable. So, he said quickly, Do I get better tools now, or do I keep guessing what these things do and hoping for the best? The tool in his hand shifted slightly, emitting a faint pulse. He looked down at it. Don't take that personally. It is adapting to you, she said. Yeah, I noticed, he replied. It's either learning or judging me. It is not capable of judgment. He raised an eyebrow. You'd be surprised what things are capable of when no one's paying attention. Another tone echoed, softer this time. He pointed again. There it is. Her lips parted slightly, not quite forming a response. Then unexpectedly she asked, Why do you speak to them? He blinked. To the machines? Yes. He considered the question, turning the tool idly in his hand. Because they respond. They are not sentient. Neither are most conversations I've had, he said. Still doesn't stop people from talking. For a moment nothing happened. Then, a faint, almost imperceptible shift crossed her expression. Not a smile, but something close enough that he noticed. Did you just almost laugh? He asked. I did not. That was definitely almost a laugh. It was not. He nodded slowly. I'm going to count that as progress. She turned away slightly, but not before he caught the smallest change in her posture. Interesting. He leaned back against one of the curved surfaces, folding his arms loosely. So what now? He asked. You've got a human walking around fixing things your experts gave up on. That has to be at least mildly inconvenient for your entire system of authority. It is, she said calmly. Thought so. But it is also valuable. He tilted his head. Careful. You're starting to sound like you appreciate me. I appreciate results, she corrected. Of course you do. A pause, then she stepped closer again, stopping just within arm's reach. Not threatening, not distant, just close enough. You do not behave as expected, she said. Yeah, I get that a lot. You do not show deference. I'm working on it, he said, very slowly. And you do not fear consequence. He hesitated for the first time. Then he smiled just slightly. Oh, I definitely fear consequences. I just don't let them make my decisions for me. That lingered between them, longer than anything else had. Her eyes held his, searching for something, an inconsistency perhaps, or a weakness she could define. Instead, she found none, or something she did not yet understand. You are, she began, then stopped. He raised an eyebrow. Go on. I'm curious how this sentence ends. She studied him for another moment, then said simply, Unresolved. He blinked. Unresolved? Yes. He considered that, then nodded slowly. I'll take it. Another faint tone echoed through the room, almost like a quiet agreement. He pointed again. They like me. They are not expressing preference. Sure they aren't. She turned toward the exit, but paused just before reaching it. Without looking back, she said, You will remain here. He sighed dramatically. I was hoping for a dramatic escape sequence. This is not a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation, he said. Some are just shorter than others. A brief silence, then very faintly. That was almost humorous. He froze. You did it again, he said. That was definitely a joke. She did not respond. The door opened. And this time, when she left, it did not feel like dismissal. He knew something was wrong before anyone came to get him. The room told him first. It wasn't dramatic, no alarms, no flashing lights, just a subtle change in the rhythm. The devices he had repaired, once steady, almost relaxed in their patterns, began to drift. Not failing, not yet, but uneasy. He looked up from the half-disassembled interface in his hands. Okay, he said slowly. Who broke what this time? A faint tone answered him, lower than usual. Yeah, he nodded. I feel it too. The door opened. 2 guards stood there, more rigid than before. Their posture carried something new, not just formality, but urgency carefully disguised as control. He pointed at them. That look? That's not a casual visit look. Come with us, one of them said. No explanation? He asked, standing up anyway. No. Great, he muttered. Love the mystery. Very dramatic. He followed them without resistance, brushing dust from his hands as he walked. The corridors felt different this time. The usual quiet confidence of the structure had shifted into something tighter, more strained. The lights adjusted too quickly, the walls reacting a fraction of a second too late. Yeah, he murmured, something's definitely wrong. They entered a chamber he hadn't seen before. It was larger than the throne room, but less ceremonial. This place was built for function, not display. Massive structures extended upward, interlocking systems layered in ways that made his brain itch just looking at them. At the center of it all, suspended in a field of flickering energy, was a core. It pulsed unevenly, too fast, then too slow, like a heart that couldn't decide how to beat. He stopped walking. "Oh," he said softly, "that's bad." The queen stood near the base of the structure, surrounded by advisors. She turned as he approached, her expression unchanged. But the tension in the room betrayed everything her face did not. "You took your time," she said. "I like to make an entrance," he replied. Then he pointed at the core. "That thing looks like it's about to ruin everyone's day." "It is the central regulator of planetary energy distribution," one of the advisors said sharply. He blinked. "So, it's not just going to ruin your day?" "No," he nodded once. "Okay, that's worse." He stepped forward, ignoring the way several figures immediately tensed. "What's it doing?" he asked. "It is destabilizing," the queen said. "Yeah, I can see that," he replied. "Why?" A pause, then one of the advisors spoke, their tone tight. "We do not know." He looked at them, then back at the core, then back at them again. "You don't know. It is a system beyond your—" Yeah, he cut in, already moving closer. "Very advanced, very complex, very impressive, still breaking." The energy field crackled slightly as he approached. He stopped just short of it, squinting at the patterns inside. "This isn't random," he murmured. "It's reacting to something." "It is reacting to itself," another advisor said. "A feedback cascade." He shook his head. "No, that's not it." He crouched slightly, tracking the rhythm. "Too irregular," he said. "If it was just a loop, it'd be consistent. This is interference." The word hung in the air. The queen's gaze sharpened. "Explain." He pointed at the core. "Something else is pushing into the system. Not directly. More like leaning on it from the outside." "That is not possible," one of the advisors said immediately. "Everything's possible," he replied. "Some things are just inconvenient." The core pulsed again, harder this time. The entire chamber dimmed, the energy field flickering dangerously. Several figures stepped back. He didn't. "Okay," he said under his breath. "You're not just unstable, you're stressed." He glanced around quickly. "What else is connected to this?" "Every major system on the planet," the queen said. "Great," he muttered. "No pressure." He stood up, turning to face her. "All right," he said. "I'm going to try something." "You will do more than try," one advisor snapped. He looked at them. "You're welcome to go first." Silence. "Yeah," he nodded. "That's what I thought." He turned back to the core, reaching for one of the nearby control interfaces. It reacted to his touch instantly, reshaping into something he could almost understand. "Okay," he said. "First rule, stop it from overreacting. You cannot simply—" "I can try," he said, "which is more than what's happening right now." He made a quick adjustment. The core flared. The energy field surged outward, forcing several people to step back. "Careful," someone shouted. "I am being careful," he replied. "This is me being careful." He adjusted again, slower this time. The pulse shifted, not stable, but less chaotic. "There," he said. "That's better." "It is still destabilizing," the advisor insisted. "Yeah," he said, "but now it's doing it in a way I can work with." He glanced at the queen. "I need time." "You have very little," she said. "Story of my life." Another pulse, stronger. The chamber shook slightly. He exhaled slowly. "Okay, no more guessing." He closed his eyes for a second, listening, not to the noise, but to the pattern beneath it, the rhythm, the imbalance, the pressure building where it shouldn't. Then his eyes snapped open. "Oh, what?" the queen asked. He looked at her, then at the core, then back at her again. You're not going to like this, he said. Speak. He hesitated just long enough to make it worse. It's not just the system, he said. It's your entire network. A pause, then. Something is forcing everything to draw more energy than it should, he continued. Not enough to notice at first, just a little more, everywhere. And now it's all hitting this. That would require coordination across multiple layers, one of the advisors said. Exactly. Silence fell again. The Queen's voice cut through it. You are suggesting interference. I'm suggesting someone's messing with your planet, he said, very carefully. Another pulse, violent this time. The core's glow surged, then fractured slightly along its surface. Several alarms finally began to sound. He flinched. Okay, that's new. I don't like that. What do we do? One of the advisors demanded. He didn't answer immediately. He was already moving. First, he said, we stop it from tearing itself apart. He reached into the interface again, his movements faster now, more certain. Second, he added, we figure out who's pushing it. The Queen stepped closer, her presence cutting through the chaos. And third? He glanced at her, a faint grin forming despite everything. Third, he said, we try not to die. A beat, then almost under her breath. Acceptable priorities. He blinked. Did you just agree with me? She didn't answer. But she didn't disagree either. The alarms did not stop. They changed. At first they had been sharp, urgent, almost panicked. Now they settled into something steadier, still dangerous, still wrong, but controlled enough to suggest the system was no longer spiraling blindly. He stood at the interface, hands moving faster than his thoughts could comfortably keep up with. The surface shifted beneath his fingers, trying to anticipate him, occasionally getting it wrong. Don't help, he muttered. You're making it worse. The interface dimmed slightly. Thank you. Behind him, voices continued in tight, controlled bursts. Energy draw exceeding projected limits. Secondary grids destabilizing. Containment thresholds. Yeah, he said without turning. Everything's falling apart. I get it. You don't need to narrate. He adjusted another sequence. The core's pulse slowed. Not stable, but less violent. He exhaled. Okay, that buys us a little time. How much, the Queen asked. He glanced back briefly. Enough to make a bad decision instead of a catastrophic one. That is not reassuring. It's realistic, he said. He stepped away from the interface, eyes still tracking the core. If something's pulling energy from everywhere, then this thing isn't the cause. It's just the victim. You stated that already, one of the advisors said. Yeah, he replied. Now I'm stating it again, but with more urgency. He began pacing, his movements quick, restless. Where would you hide something like that? He murmured. Not central, too obvious. Not isolated either. Needs access. Somewhere, in between. The Queen watched him closely. You believe the interference is embedded within our systems. I believe someone didn't walk in through the front door, he said. They leaned in through the walls. That is not a precise explanation. It's the best one I've got while your planet is trying to implode. Another pulse. The core flickered harder this time, a sharp crack running along its surface before sealing itself again. He stopped pacing. Okay, that's getting worse again. You said you stabilized it, an advisor snapped. I said I slowed it down, he corrected. There's a difference. He turned back to the interface, making another adjustment. The system resisted this time, the surface flickering as if uncertain. Come on, he muttered. Work with me. The interface glitched. He froze. Oh, that's new. What is it? The Queen asked. He leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing. It's hesitating. That is not possible. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. He tapped the surface again. The response lagged. Not long, but enough. That's not system failure, he said. That's interference. The word landed heavier this time. He stepped back slowly. Something's inside your network, he said. Not just pulling energy, controlling flow. Silence, then. That would require access beyond any known clearance, one advisor said. Or something that doesn't care about your clearance, he replied. The Queen's gaze shifted slightly. her focus turning inward, calculating. If it is embedded, she said, it must have a point of origin. Exactly, he said, pointing at her. That's what we need. And how do you propose we locate it? He hesitated, then smiled slightly. You're not going to like this. She did not react. Explain. He gestured toward the core. We push back. That is vague. We overload the system, he said. Not enough to break it, just enough to make whatever's interfering react. That risks accelerating the destabilization. Yeah, he nodded. That's the bad decision part I mentioned. Another pulse. Stronger. The chamber trembled. He winced. We're running out of time for good decisions. The advisors began speaking again, overlapping, arguing in sharp tones. It is too dangerous. We cannot risk total collapse. This human does not understand. Hey, he said loudly, cutting through them. I understand exactly one thing right now. They stopped. He pointed at the core. That's going to fail. Silence. And if it fails, he continued, you don't have a system problem anymore. You have a planet problem. No one spoke. The Queen stepped forward. Do it, she said. The advisors turned immediately. Your Majesty, this is unacceptable. It is necessary, she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the noise. The chamber fell silent again. He looked at her, just for a second. You're getting better at this, he said. She ignored that. Proceed. He turned back to the interface, hands already moving. All right, he muttered. Let's make something uncomfortable. He adjusted the energy flow, deliberately pushing it higher than the system wanted. The core reacted instantly. The pulse spiked. The light flared. The entire chamber shook harder this time, a deep vibration running through the structure. Careful, someone shouted. I am being careful, he replied. This is the careful version. He pushed a little more. The system resisted. Then, something changed. A ripple. Subtle, but different. He froze. There. What? The Queen asked. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on a specific section of the energy flow, where the pattern twisted just slightly out of alignment. That's not part of the system, he said. Identify it. He adjusted the interface again, isolating the anomaly. The projection shifted, zooming in on the distortion. It wasn't large. It wasn't obvious. But it didn't belong. That's it, he said quietly. The room leaned in. What is it? The Queen asked. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, it's hiding. Silence. He exhaled slowly. Not reacting like a system, he continued. Reacting like something that knows it's being watched. The words settled heavily. The advisors exchanged uneasy glances. That implies intent, one said. Yeah, he replied. It does. Another pulse. The anomaly shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly. He smiled faintly. Got you? What now? The Queen asked. He looked at her, then back at the anomaly, then back at her again. Now, he said, we make it uncomfortable enough to show itself. And if it does not, he shrugged slightly, then we get very creative. A pause, then quietly. You enjoy this? He blinked. Enjoy what? She held his gaze. The uncertainty. He considered that, then smiled just a little. I enjoy solving things, he said. Another pulse. Stronger. The anomaly flickered again. He turned back to the interface, focus sharpening. Good, he murmured. Let's see how long you can hide. The anomaly did not like being watched. It shifted again, slightly faster this time, no longer pretending to be part of the system. The distortion tightened, pulling energy in a way that wasn't consistent with any structure he had seen before. He leaned closer to the interface, eyes narrowing. Yeah, you're definitely not supposed to be here. The core pulsed violently behind him, the chamber shaking in response. The alarms rose again, sharper now, as if the system itself was growing impatient. You are losing stability, one of the advisors said. I noticed, he replied. It's hard to miss the whole planet trying to collapse thing. He adjusted the flow again, pushing the system just enough to force the anomaly to react. It did. The distortion snapped outward, briefly revealing something beneath it. Not a shape, Not exactly, but a pattern that didn't belong to any natural system. It was too precise, too intentional. Okay, he said quietly. You're artificial. The Queen stepped closer, her presence cutting through the noise. Can it be removed? He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. Yeah. A pause. Probably. That uncertainty again, she said. Wouldn't be me without it. He reached deeper into the interface, isolating the anomaly completely now. The projection expanded, surrounding it with layers of controlled energy. All right, he muttered. If you're going to hide in the system, you have to play by the system's rules. The anomaly shifted again, faster now, trying to slip away. He smiled faintly. Too late. He collapsed the surrounding energy inward. The anomaly resisted, hard. The core flared, the chamber trembling violently as the interference pushed back, drawing more power in a desperate attempt to maintain itself. Energy spike increasing. Containment failing. Yeah, he said, teeth clenched slightly. I know. He adjusted again, faster now, his movements precise despite the chaos. Come on, he muttered. You wanted attention. Now you've got it. The anomaly flickered violently, its pattern breaking apart under the pressure. For a moment it almost escaped, slipping along the edge of the system, trying to disperse itself. He caught it. Nope. He tightened the containment. The projection shrank, compressing the anomaly into a smaller and smaller space. The core screamed, not in sound, but in energy. A sharp, overwhelming surge that made the entire chamber feel like it might tear itself apart. The Queen did not move. Her eyes remained fixed on him. Finish it, she said. He nodded once. Yeah. One final adjustment. The containment collapsed. The anomaly vanished. Just like that. The core pulsed once, hard. Then again. Then it stabilized. The light smoothed out, the violent fluctuations fading into a steady, controlled rhythm. The alarms cut off abruptly. Silence followed. Real silence. He stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, staring at the now stable core. Okay, he said finally. That went better than expected. No one spoke. The advisors stared at the system, then at him, their expressions caught somewhere between disbelief and reluctant acceptance. He turned slightly, glancing at them. You're welcome. Still no response. He sighed. I'm starting to think you all don't like me. That is not accurate, one of them said after a moment. He raised an eyebrow. Oh? We do not understand you. Ah, he nodded. That's fair. The Queen stepped forward. The room shifted around her, not physically, but in presence. The tension that had filled the space earlier had changed. No longer sharp, no longer hostile. Something else now. She stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, it is gone, she said. Yeah, he replied. You're not being secretly drained by an invisible system anymore. That's usually a good sign. You removed it without full knowledge of its origin. Still worked. You took a risk that could have resulted in total system failure. He shrugged slightly. Yeah. A pause, then, you were correct. The words landed heavier than anything else she had said. He blinked. I'm sorry, can you repeat that? He asked. Her expression remained composed. You were correct. He stared at her for a second, then smiled. I'm going to remember this moment forever. I do not recommend that. Too late. A faint shift touched her expression again. He noticed. Of course he did. So, he said, glancing back at the now stable core. What now? You go back to ruling, I go back to fixing things that don't want to be fixed? You will remain, she said. He looked at her. Not surprised this time. Just considering. Yeah, he said slowly. I figured. You have altered more than our systems, she continued. He tilted his head. That sounds serious. You have altered perspective. He paused. That wasn't what he expected. Yours are? He asked. She held his gaze. Yes. That lingered. Longer than anything else. He shifted slightly, suddenly less certain what to do with his hands. Well, he said after a moment, that's new. You do not measure worth by status, she said. You do not rely on established hierarchy. You question everything. Yeah, he nodded. It gets me in trouble. It also reveals things we overlook. He smiled faintly. You mean the obvious stuff? Yes. He glanced around the chamber, then back at her. Careful, he said. You're starting to sound like you agree with me again. I agree with results, she said. Of course you do. A pause, then he added, quieter this time. But you're getting better at it. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she turned slightly, looking at the stabilized core, then back at him. You're not insignificant, she said. He let out a small breath. That's a big improvement from where we started. You are necessary, he blinked. Wow, he said softly. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was not intended as one. Still counts. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he looked down at his hands, still slightly marked from the work, then back at her. So, he said, what do you do with someone like me? She considered that. Not quickly, not dismissively, but carefully. Finally. We learn, he smiled. Good, he said, because I'm not done asking questions. Another brief pause, then almost imperceptibly, I expected that. He laughed quietly. Yeah, he said, you're starting to understand me. And you, she said, are beginning to understand us. He glanced around the chamber one last time, at the systems that no longer felt quite as alien as they had before. Yeah, he said, maybe I am. The core pulsed steadily behind them, no longer unstable, no longer strained, just balanced. And for the first time since he arrived, so was everything else.